Righto, so now that the training's all in, I'm going to put the crossmember on. So I'm going to take it off the old gearbox here and bolt it up and sort of see what I'm working with. I don't really know. I know it's got to be further back, about 55mm, but as far as height wise and stuff, I'm not quite sure. So I'm just going to bolt it up and see what I'm working with and make some plans off that and see if I can get this either modified or just make it a complete new crossmember. I'll probably actually handball that to a mate of mine. I'm not confident, you know, I do small weld jobs, but something like a crossmember that's going to hold my gearbox in and have a lot of torsional loading on it, I'll get someone that's actually good at welding to do it. Now for the transcooler lines, I'm going to try reuse these. They're the same thread, apparently, on TH400, TH700, 4065, 4060, blah blah blah. So I'm going to pull these out, thread them in to the tranny. Now the 4060, the TH400 ones are sort of like on an angle like that. So I'm going to have to bend these around a bit, and then I'm going to flare the ends of the pipes, flare the other ends, which are about here at the moment, and then put a little bit of rubber hose between them just to join them up. That way I don't have to get AN fittings and run the speed flow, and it's very expensive. So if I can retain these and just use a little bit of flexi here, then that'll be ace. So we'll do that now and yeah, go from there. Well, I got pretty lucky with the crossmember. So this is the crossmember I was using before. It turned out to be 80mm further backwards, which just so happens to be the bolt spacing of this crossmember. So I can mount it on the rear bolt hole, as you can see there, and she all bolts up. So what I'll do is I'll just mount it like this for now, and then I'll get a proper one made, obviously, later on, but I can use this for the rest of the build how it is, which is nice because, you know, you can't really do everything when you don't know where it's going to sit. So this is exactly where it's going to sit. It's just going to be a nice amount. So I'll leave this for now, put the drive shaft in, hook up the shifter cable, put the exhaust back on, and yeah, we're pretty much all done. Drive shaft is in, all torqued up, marking every bolt when I torque it. Just, you know how it is, these project cars, you're not quite sure if you just put something in finger tight or actually done it up. So everything I'm putting in I am doing up, but I'm also marking it just in case. So once I'm finished, I'll check all my marks, as long as everything's marked, and I know we're all sweet. So getting there, looking more like a car now. Alrighty, so I got the dipstick all bent up in the correct fashion to fit. So compared to what it was, it's very different. So the dipstick kind of goes into the tranny on a bit of an angle, such like this. So it comes up and I've bent it here. Now bend here, I started off bending it cold, and that didn't work out too well, so I ended up using the map gas, but it was already creased, which kind of made things more difficult for myself. You can see this one's quite nice, and this one not so much. So I'm going to have a little bit more of a go at flattening it out a bit, so the dipstick tube goes in there, the dipstick itself goes in there a bit nicer, because it does go in there, but it's a bit tight on that radius there, so I do need to sort of fix it up a bit. And I bent this bracket as well. It mounts on with this bolt here on the rear of the head, where the rear lift brace goes. So this is all bolted up nicely to the factory mounts, so it's not going to be jiggling around and leaking and stuff. So yeah, should be good. So next up is the transcooler lines. So I ripped them off the 4060. So these are the ones here. So I've got the fittings in the box, and I just have to bend them because they come out of the box kind of on an angle like that. So at the moment they're facing downwards, so I need to bend these so they face forwards, and then I'll get them a bead rolled on the end of them, and then a bead rolled on the end of the other ones, and then just put a bit of flexi line between them. We've also got a transcooler, a transmission gasket for the pan, because I took that off when I inspected the tranny when I first bought it. So I got to change that, and then I'll put the shifter linkage. I've got the shifter linkage mocked up on there at the moment, so I'll put that on there properly, and yeah, we're very close to starting this thing up. Okay, so here's the whole power steering cooler line assembly. So these are the fittings that are out of 4L60. I gave them a good clean up. So they got a little rubber seal inside, and then this hose here fits inside the fitting. It's a pretty snug fit, as you can see, and then a little retaining clip goes in there and holds it in. So it's a pretty solid fitting, and I like to retain it obviously because I've already got it, and you know, it's cheap and easy. It's easy to take them out, and I don't have to get expensive AN fittings. So what I'm going to do is fit these to the gearbox with some Teflon paste. It's just a straight thread. So yeah, it's got a bit of a taper on the end, so it sort of nips up against the outside of the gearbox. So I'll just put some thread sealant on it like it was before, and nip them up. Then I'll sort of mock these up, fit them in there, see where I need to bend them, and then I'll heat them up and bend them to their appropriate spot. Clean up the ends of them, obviously clean them out because they've got a bit of sand and shit in them, and then I'll take them to my mate's place who's got a bead roller and sort of roll on a bead similar to what's on here now on the end. So it's a little fitting that goes inside the pipe, and then it sort of rolls it from the inside out. That way when you put a hose on there and you've got 60 psi of pressure behind it, it won't pop the hose off. So that'll be my next thing. It's a little hard to see, but here's the dipstick tube here. So that runs down the side of the gearbox. Now, again, it's pretty hard to tell you, to show you, but there's a mounting bracket on the back of the motor. This is the original bolt. Now the pipe where it is doesn't sit snug against the head, so I've got another bolt which is longer with the same thread, and I'm just going to get some spacers and space it off the head, and that way it's fixed properly, so it won't have any chance of leaking. But yeah, I don't think you'll really be able to see in there, but that's the dipstick, guys. So on to the next thing.
Alrighty, so I've got the power steering lines all bent up how I want them, so I just used the oxy matte gas, and bent them all in the right shape, and I also cut them down a little bit as well. So how I sort of worked it out is I fit them up, and then that's how I needed to bend it this way. I just put a little paint pen dot, which means I needed to bend it at that point and that way. So then I just inched it over, and then I took it to my mate's house and we bead rolled the end of them. It's not a massive bead, but it'll do. It'll hold it on there. So that's all the lines, and then these are the main ones. So I cut them down as well and bead rolled them. So now I just got to clean them out, and I'll fit them up. And I've got some new hose and some clamps, so I'll run the whole system. The hose I got before, it was actually Gates power steering hose, but it seemed to have gone pretty hard. So I'm going to chop them off. I had to actually cut it with a Stanley knife to get the hose off at the front. So I'm going to rerun that as well. Then I've got some new V-bands because I demolished the old ones at Race Wars. There was a bit of like gravel at the side of the track, and there was a bit of a dip there, and I went into the dip and smacked the V-bands. It was kind of my fault more or less because I had them mounted like this. So this part of the clamp got hit. So this time I'm going to sort of mount them like that. I can't mount them like this because there's not enough clearance. They sit really close to the floor of the car, but I'll mount them kind of like this, so it shouldn't get hit then. Sorry about the audio quality. I'm getting a bit sick, so you do get that. So I've also, if I just jump under real quick, I've mounted the sump with the new gasket, and I've also mounted the shifter cable. So I'll jump under there soon, and I'll show you the old shifter cable. But now I'm just going to mount the exhaust system with my V-bands, and then finally do the power steering lines, and then there's not much left. There's also a Speedo. I've got a little Dakota Digital Speedo, I'll show you guys in a minute, that's going to convert the cable drive to an electronic signal, so I can put that back into the PCM and log speed, because it's quite handy logging speed. With all your logs when you're doing drag racing, you can tell at what speed something did something, so I'd really like to log speed if I can, so this will allow me to do that. Alright, let me do this and I'll show you the result. So this is the Speedo drive that I'm going to be using. Now, because TH400s are a cable Speedo, I can't use that. I need a digital output. So what I've got is this Dakota Digital sensing unit. So it's an SEN011 GM transmission center package. So what it gives you is, it's probably easy to show you the manual, to be honest. Gives you a little drive, so the cable Speedo drive that goes into this coupling, and then the sensor screws into that, and then it'll give you an 8,000 pulse per mile, or about 8 pulse per revolution output. Now I'm pretty sure the stock 4L60 is 40,000 pulse, so 40 pulse per revolution. So I just need to go into the PCM, go into the input speed, and change it to 8,000, and that should get me roughly in the ballpark, and then I can fine tune it from there. And then out of the PCM, I will output that to the dash. So I'm going to input this into the PCM so I can log it. I could just connect this straight up to my dash and have my dash working, but then I won't have any Speedo sense on the ECU, which is not too good. It's a lot better to have Speedo, especially for dyno and all that sort of stuff. They kind of need a Speedo input. So I'll hook that up. Got a little bit hard to see, but I've got the dipstick here, and what I've done is I've just put a ladder clip. Not sure if you're going to be able to see that, but I've put a ladder clip down there, and that holds the dipstick just with the cable tie around the ladder clip. I was going to bolt it straight to the head, but the bolt hole didn't line up, which is, that was the bolt I was going to use. So you can see it didn't line up very well. So that will work sweet. Okay, so I've got all my transcooler lines and exhaust done. So this is the transcooler line up front. The other one I've just got running down into a bottle. This is the return line. So what I'm going to do is flush out the cooler core, because this tranny, the previous tranny, sort of failed somewhat. So there's going to be some dirty fluid and some clutch material in there. So when I start the car, I'll be able to run it up. And not only that, I'll be able to see that the pump in the transmission is working. So obviously if I don't have any oil flow out here, I know something's wrong. Whereas if I had this all plumbed up, I wouldn't really know. So I'll flush the tranny, and it's also a good check to make sure the tranny's working. So we'll just go under, and I'll show you the rest of the transcooler lines. So this is the other ones here. So you've got the hard lines into the gearbox, and then soft line to these ones, and then again I've got a ladder clip off the sump bolt there, which is just a cable tie just to sort of retain this section, just to keep the hard lines hard, because I got another clamp here, the factory one, but there was no factory one at the rear because it was hard line all the way to the gearbox, so that holds that nice and sturdy. Now I've got the exhaust on, so now I just got to run that sensor and put my O2 sensors in and run the harness down to the gearbox and plug it all in, because that's the crank angle sensor, the O2s and the Speedo will all run off that harness. So I need to run that now, and then it's starting time. Alrighty, so I've got the speed sensor in. In hindsight, I should have done that before, when the box was sort of down, or when the exhaust and everything was still off, because it was quite a pain in the ass. I had to drop the Crossmember again and loosen the engine mounts to drop the engine down to actually get it on, because it's a bit of a stupid setup really, but it I should have really filmed this when the Crossmember one's on either. I'm really doing well. If we look under here, hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah, it's got this collar that you thread on first, put a little shaft in, and then you thread this on, and then you got to wind the sensor on, which is a bit retarded. So you need obviously a lot of room top and bottom, but also I couldn't wind it on as it is, because you can see it's hard up against the car. So I had to drop it down until I had enough clearance, and I just had enough clearance to get it on. Now it doesn't look like it's fitting, but there's actually about 1.5 mm gap between the body of the car and the sensor, which isn't much, I know. It's solid mounted engine, but it does have a rubber mount cross member. Now I don't assume it's going to have sideways movement, but it probably will. I've got to get a cross member made next week, so what I'll get him to do is just clearance it, aka a hammer. Just, a few mil, it won't hurt, and just enough to give that sensor a bit of breathing room, just to account for a bit of movement. You obviously don't want to rub against the sensor, because any loading against that, it'll just crack off and could cause an oil leak. Worst comes to worst, it could crack the actual speed sensor housing.
But as you can, I think I can film it. You can see there's movement in the sensor. There's movement in the actual housing in the gearbox. So yeah, the sensor is not touching it. It does have movement, but it's not enough. So these are the wires for the sensor. Now they give you enough to go all the way up to the front of the car. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet, whether I'm going to terminate it at the ECU or terminate it down here. Because if I terminate it at down here and it doesn't work, then I've got no wire left. Whereas if I terminate it up the top there and I find it doesn't work, I'll leave a wire as long as I can, then I can terminate it to the actual dash instead. But yeah, like I say, I do kind of need a speed sense for the dyno, I think, so probably should terminate it to the ECU. So I'm going to have a bit more of a think about that one, and sort of go back to the drawing board, maybe talk to my tuner and see what he reckons, and then this is the Speedo here, so I'll have to chop this off, put a Deutsch plug on it, put a Deutsch plug on this, and then I can clip it in. But I might put a Deutsch plug on it when it's long, and just see if I'm getting Speedo. So yeah, that should pretty much do it. Alrighty, it's time. So I've already put about 5 litres in there, and I started up for about 5 seconds and got almost probably about a litre. What's this container? Oh, this is 1.5 litres, so I got about 600 mils out of it in that 5 seconds, so I can definitely tell the pump's working. This bottle was a little bit dirty before, but the fluid that's dripping out of the end of this is nice and red. So I'm going to plug that back on, plumb that up, and then put some more fluid in there, probably another 3 or 4 litres, and then start it up again and rinse and repeat until I get sort of a moderately good level where I can continue to run it and check the level at the same time. So I think it takes about 10 litres, so I'm halfway there. Well, I tell you what, it's been about 3 months since I've heard this thing. So I filled it up, I put about 9 litres in it total, and that seems pretty good. The converter was already filled quite a lot, and it's a small converter, so I think that should be about right. It's about halfway, and it's not at full temp yet, so I don't want to overfill it. That should be enough, and moving it around at the moment. I'll check it after a bit of a drive. But she's running good. Oh yeah. I am wrapped. No leaks so far, so yeah, all is looking well. Alrighty, so I've got the Speedo connected, put a 2-pin Deutsch plug on it, and wired that up. So I just worked out with the multimeter, using continuity, which one was earth, which was the orange wire. So then the black wire on this Speedo is earth, so you got a ground wire and you just got a signal wire. And that's it. So it's all connected, so now I just got to go into the ECU and tell it that it's an 8,000 pulse per mile signal, and my Speedo should roughly work, and I can just fine tune it from there. Cool, so we're all done under here. Just a quick video of my shifter cable setup. And yeah, so it's all good under here, so it's time to go back on the ground and to go for a test drive. First time it's going to be moving under its own power with the new gearbox, so fingers crossed it works, so I don't actually know. Okay, so now I am adjusting all the stuff in the ECU. So first I've gone over the trans tab and changed that to a non-electronic auto, so it doesn't
give me lots of codes and stuff like that and try to send voltage to a gearbox which is no longer there. Then I've gone over the Speedo tab and adjusted all my settings. So this used to be a 40 pulse per revolution for the 4L60. The new one's an 8 pulse per revolution. That's 8,000 pulse per mile, but they said, Dakota Digital anyway, have said it's an 8 pulse per revolution. So I guess they must think you have a tiny tyre. But anyway, we'll see if that one's true, because giving it a pulse per mile is a bit stupid, because based on your tyre size and your diff ratio, it's going to change. So anyway, we won't get into that. So I've changed this to an 8 pulse per revolution. Now the gear tyre ratio size here, you use this tool here, Gear Tyre Wizard. Then you have to put in your tyre height. So if we just go onto Google, there's a tyresize.com. Put in your tyre, so it's a 275/40/17 in my case, which gives you a tyre height of 25.7 inches. Put 25.7 inches in there, and your gear ratio, which is a 411 for my diff ratio. Hit adjust, and it will repopulate that table, which is this number here. Then just make sure you're all working in miles, because this is pulse per revolution, this is trans revolution a mile, and then this one is vehicle speed sensor pulses per mile. So we've got to adjust this one as well. So what we've got to do is get 3,225 times by 8, and we've got to adjust this table, this number here. And then, after we've done all that, our speedo should be relatively close. Based on, obviously Dakota Digital has said it's an 8,000 pulse per mile, which equates to 8 pulses per revolution. Judging that that number is correct, then everything else should be correct. But if that number is not correct, then everything else is going to be a significant amount out. So you can imagine if you go 3,225 times by 8 versus times by, say, 10, it's going to be very different on this number here. So I'm hoping that their value is correct, otherwise we're going to be adjusting quite a lot. But we'll go for a test drive and see what it's like.